The massive stone tablets stood silent in the deepest vaults of the Galactic Council archives. Their surfaces bore warnings carved in languages so old that only 3 beings in the entire galaxy could still read them. Professor Zelkane was one of those 3. The elderly Thrakari scholar ran his 6 fingers over the ancient symbols, his pale blue skin growing darker with concern as he translated each line. The warning was clear. Written by a species that had vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago. Beware the young species from the 3rd planet of the yellow star. They burn like fire and spread like plague. Do not wake them, do not seek them. Let them sleep in their small corner of space, for they are the ending of all things peaceful. Zelkane stepped back from the tablet, his breathing rapid. He had been studying these warnings for decades. But today was different. Today, the Galactic Council's Exploration Division had announced their latest discovery. A small blue planet in a remote spiral arm, inhabited by a species that called itself human. The communication chamber buzzed with activity as representatives from 47 different species gathered for the emergency session. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the various atmospheric requirements, creating a swirling mix of gases that made everyone slightly uncomfortable. That discomfort seemed appropriate, given the news Zelkane was about to deliver. "Honored council members," Zelkane began, his voice trembling despite his attempt to remain calm. "I have studied the ancient warnings for 73 years. Every symbol, every phrase, every dire prediction. And now, I fear our exploration teams have found exactly what the ancients told us to avoid." Techly, the chamber erupted in chittering, clicking, and various other sounds of dismissal. Counselor Vex Thule, a towering insectoid with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights like disco balls, raised one of his 4 arms for silence. "Professor Zelkane, with respect, these warnings you speak of are millions of years old. Surely they cannot refer to any species that exists today." "That is where you are wrong," Zelkane replied. Activating the holographic display at the center of the chamber, the image of a small blue planet appeared, slowly rotating. "Earth. 3rd planet from a yellow star. Inhabited by bipedal mammals who call themselves humans. The ancient's description matches perfectly." A wave of nervous energy passed through the chamber. The Vrothak delegation began their characteristic humming, a sound they made when deeply troubled. The crystalline beings from Sector 7 dimmed their natural luminescence, their version of a worried frown. "Even if this is true," said Counselor Miralens, her melodic voice carrying the authority of someone who had led the ethereal collective for 3 centuries, "surely these humans cannot be as dangerous as primitive warnings suggest. Our exploration team reports they have not even achieved faster than light travel." Zelkane's skin turned an even darker shade of blue. "That is exactly what the ancients said made them so dangerous. They called humans the climbing fire, a species that takes every limitation as a challenge to overcome. The warnings say that humanity's greatest strength is their refusal to accept that anything is impossible." Captain Jorik Thane of the exploration vessel Times Silent Dawn Times stood to address the council. The hegemony officer was known throughout the galaxy for his level-headed approach to first contact situations. His metallic exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber lights as he spoke. "Council members, I have observed this species for 6 standard months. They are indeed remarkable, but hardly the galaxy-ending threat these ancient warnings describe. Yes, they show unusual persistence and creativity, but they are still bound by the laws of physics like the rest of us." "Are they?" Zelkane challenged, bringing up another holographic display. "Captain, tell the council about their space program." Thane's confidence wavered slightly. "Well, they have managed to send members of their species to their planet's natural satellite, using chemical propulsion. Impressive for their technological level, certainly, but hardly." "Chemical propulsion," Zelkane interrupted. "Captain, when the Thrakari first reached space, we used electromagnetic fields generated by our natural bioelectric abilities. The Vrothak used gravity manipulation they learned from their planet's unique environment. The ethereals simply willed themselves through the void using collective consciousness. Tell me, What natural advantages do humans possess for spaceflight? The chamber fell silent. Thane cleared his throat nervously. None that we have observed. They appear to have used pure mechanical engineering and mathematical calculations to overcome their limitations. Quote, "Exactly," Zelkane said, his voice growing stronger. Every other species in this galaxy developed space travel by adapting their natural abilities. Humans strapped themselves to controlled explosions and rode them into the void. The ancients called this the madness that conquers stars. Counselor Vex Thull's compound eyes refracted the chamber lights in complex patterns, indicating deep thought. Professor, even accepting that humans match these ancient descriptions, surely the warnings are overstated. What could one pre-FTL species possibly do to threaten galactic civilization? Zelkane pulled up more displays, showing various scenes from Earth. Cities that stretched to the horizon. Machines that could think. Weapons that could split atoms. Art that captured emotions across species barriers. The ancients wrote, "They do not ask what is possible, they ask what is necessary. They do not seek harmony with their world. They seek to transform it. They do not accept limits. They transcend them." The images shifted to show humans in various situations. Rescuing people from disasters, building impossible structures, sending messages into space hoping for contact with other species. But Zelkane also showed darker images. Wars that ravaged continents. Environmental destruction. Weapons of unimaginable power. Look at their planet, Zelkane continued. In just a few thousand years, they went from hunter-gatherers to splitting atoms. They filled their skies with flying machines, their orbit with satellites, and their minds with dreams of reaching the stars. But they also created weapons that could destroy their entire world multiple times over. The ethereal delegation pulsed with a pale, worried light. Their representative, Miralens, spoke with unusual urgency. If they are so dangerous, why haven't they destroyed themselves already? Because, Zelkane said grimly, they learned to be afraid of their own power. The ancients wrote about this too. They called it the paradox of the climbing fire. Humans become dangerous when they stop being afraid of themselves. Captain Thane shifted uncomfortably. Professor, are you suggesting we should avoid contact with humanity entirely? The Council's standing orders are to evaluate all spacefaring species for potential membership. They are not spacefaring yet, Zelkane reminded him. And the ancients' warnings are clear. Do not wake the fire. Do not give it fuel. Do not teach it to burn brighter. Do not teach it. Do not wake the fire. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members argued that the warnings were too old to be relevant. Others insisted that any species capable of inspiring such fear in the ancients deserved careful study. A few suggested immediate quarantine of the entire solar system. As the arguments raged, Zelkane noticed something troubling in Captain Thane's expression. The exploration officer kept glancing at his personal communicator, and his metallic features showed signs of barely contained excitement. Captain, Zelkane said during a break in the proceedings, is there something you haven't told the council? Thane hesitated, then activated a private communication channel. Professor, I received a priority message from my ship during the session. Our monitoring station has detected something unusual. The holographic display shifted to show a new image. A sleek metal object moving away from Earth at impossible speeds. It was clearly of human construction, but it was traveling faster than light. That's impossible, breathed Counselor Vex Thull. Our intelligence reports indicate they haven't developed FTL technology. Thane's expression was grim. According to our sensors, they haven't. This vessel appears to be using a completely unknown propulsion method. Our physics teams can't even begin to explain how it works. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted questions and accusations. Some blamed the exploration team for contamination. Others demanded immediate military action. A few simply stared at the display in shock. Zelkane felt his heart sink as he realized what was happening. Captain, how long ago was this vessel detected? Approximately 18 hours ago, ship time, Thane replied. It's currently heading toward the galactic core at a velocity we can't accurately measure. 18 hours, Zelkane repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. And you're just reporting this now? Before Thane could answer, every communication device in the chamber began blaring emergency alerts. The main display shifted to show a massive space station in the galaxy's central hub. The pride of galactic civilization. Home to billions of beings from hundreds of species, the station was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone, as if it had never existed. In its place was a small vessel of obviously human design, broadcasting a simple message in perfect galactic standard. We came as soon as we got your invitation. We're here to help. The chamber fell silent, except for the sound of various species' breathing apparatus working overtime. Zelkane stared at the display, his worst fears realized. Somehow, some way, first contact with humanity had already occurred, and judging by the impossible speed of their response and the casual way they had apparently relocated an entire space station, the humans had learned things they should never have learned. The warnings, he whispered. We should have heeded the warnings, but it was too late. The humans were here. They had capabilities that shouldn't exist, and they thought they were helping. As the ancients had written in their most dire prediction, when the climbing fire offers aid, worlds burn not from malice, but from kindness unrestrained. Captain Thane received another message, this one causing his exoskeleton to actually crack under stress. Professor, he said, his voice shaking, the human vessel is requesting permission to land on the Council homeworld. They want to discuss mutual cooperation and the advancement of galactic civilization. Zelkane closed his eyes, remembering another line from the ancient warnings. They will offer to share their gifts. Do not accept. Do not learn their methods. Do not let them teach you to reach beyond your grasp. But as he opened his eyes and saw the expectant faces of the council members, Zelkane realized that the choice was no longer in their hands. The humans had arrived, and they were offering exactly what the ancients had warned against. Help. The question was no longer whether to make contact with humanity. The question was whether galactic civilization would survive the encounter. As if reading his thoughts, another message arrived from the human vessel. We've taken the liberty of upgrading your space station systems while we had it, relocated it to a safer orbit, and improved its efficiency by approximately 847%. We hope you don't mind the presumption. We thought you'd appreciate the gesture. The space station reappeared on the display, but it was clearly no longer the same structure. It was larger, more complex, and emanating energy readings that made their best sensors overload. Somehow, in the span of a few hours, humans had not only moved an entire station but had completely rebuilt it, using technologies the galaxy's greatest minds couldn't begin to understand. Zelkane looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. They were staring at the display with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Some were already pulling up communication channels, eager to learn more about these miraculous humans. Others were calling for military response teams. None of them understood what they were truly dealing with. The humans hadn't just achieved faster-than-light travel. They had apparently mastered space and time itself, along with engineering principles that violated everything the galaxy knew about physics. And they had done it all in the name of helping. The climbing fire has awakened, Zelkane said quietly. And it burns brighter than the ancients ever imagined. The communication chamber filled with the sound of incoming messages as species across the galaxy began reporting similar encounters, human vessels appearing in their space, impossible technologies being demonstrated, offers of help and improvement and advancement, all exactly as the ancients had warned, and all happening far too fast for anyone to stop. The age of human influence over galactic civilization had begun, whether the galaxy was ready or not. And as Zelkane watched his fellow council members struggle to comprehend what they were witnessing, he realized that ready or not was no longer the issue. The issue was survival. The humans were here. They were helping. And the galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks had passed since the humans arrived at the galactic core, and the universe was becoming unrecognizable. What had once taken civilizations millennia to achieve, humans were accomplishing in days. What had been considered absolute laws of physics were now viewed as mild suggestions to be politely ignored. Dr. Sarah Chen stepped out of the impossible doorway that connected her laboratory on Earth directly to the Galactic Council chambers, 13,000 light-years away. The portal technology she had developed made faster-than-light travel obsolete before most species had even achieved it. She carried a cup of coffee from her favorite cafe in Seattle, the steam still rising from the hot liquid despite having just traveled across the galaxy instantaneously. "Good morning, Professor Zelkane," she said cheerfully, her translator device rendering her words into perfect Thrakari dialect. "I hope you've had time to review the proposals I sent over yesterday." Zelkane stared at the human woman with a mixture of fascination and growing dread. The proposals, she mentioned, had arrived via a communication method that bypassed every known transmission system in the galaxy. The messages had simply appeared directly in his mind, complete with detailed technical specifications and holographic demonstrations. "Dr. Chen," he managed, his blue skin darker than usual with stress. "These proposals. They describe technologies that could reshape the fundamental nature of reality itself." Sarah smiled brightly and took a sip of her coffee. "I know. Isn't it exciting? The applications are practically limitless. We could eliminate scarcity entirely, make death optional, give every species access to pocket dimensions for expansion. And that's just the beginning." The casual way she discussed rewriting the laws of existence made Zelkane's throat go dry. "Dr. Chen, with all due respect, perhaps we should proceed more cautiously." "Cautiously?" Sarah looked genuinely puzzled. "Professor, we've run extensive simulations. The safety margins are well within acceptable parameters. There's really no risk at all." That was precisely what terrified Zelkane. Humans seemed incapable of recognizing the concept of too much progress too fast. To them, every problem was simply a puzzle waiting to be solved. Every limitation, an invitation to innovate. Across the galaxy, the effects of human helpfulness were becoming impossible to ignore. The trade world of Nexus Prime had been upgraded with human technology that could manufacture literally anything from base matter. The result was an economy that collapsed overnight when scarcity became extinct. Entire civilizations built around resource management and trade negotiations suddenly found their foundational purposes obsolete. On the water world of Aquatica, humans had solved the overpopulation problem by teaching the inhabitants how to create pocket dimensions. Now every citizen lived in their own private universe, connected to others through quantum communication networks. The concept of shared physical space had become meaningless, and with it, centuries of social evolution. The warrior culture of the Cortex Empire had been pacified when humans demonstrated that conflict was inefficient. They had shown Cortex generals how to achieve the psychological satisfaction of battle through direct neural stimulation, eliminating the need for actual warfare. The Empire's entire identity crisis was still ongoing. Commander Vashti of the Cortex military delegation stood in the council chambers, her usually proud bearing sagging with defeat. "They have made us obsolete," she said quietly. "For 10,000 years, my people have built our entire civilization around the concept of honorable combat. Now these humans tell us we can experience the joy of battle without the risk, the glory without the struggle. What are we supposed to do with that knowledge?" Dr. Chen looked sympathetic. "I understand the cultural adjustment must be difficult, Commander. But think of the benefits. No more casualties. No more destroyed worlds. No more orphaned children. We can give you all the excitement of warfare with none of the suffering." "But the suffering was part of the purpose," Vashti replied desperately. "The risk made the victory meaningful. The possibility of loss made the fight worth fighting." Sarah's expression showed the genuine confusion that many humans displayed when confronted with alien concepts they couldn't immediately improve. "I don't understand. If we can give you better results with less cost, why wouldn't you want that?" This exchange perfectly illustrated the problem that was tearing the galaxy apart. Humans weren't conquering through force or deception. They were conquering through kindness. solving problems that civilizations hadn't even realized they wanted solved. Professor Zelkane pulled up a secure communication channel to speak with other members of what had become known as the Resistance. Not rebels fighting against human rule, but scholars and leaders trying to preserve some semblance of traditional galactic civilization. "The situation grows worse daily," reported Dr. Thexnor from the academic collective. "Human students have enrolled in our universities. They complete centuries of study in weeks, then begin suggesting improvements to our fundamental theories. They don't mean to be disrespectful, but they cannot seem to grasp why we might want to preserve knowledge that they can prove is inefficient." "At least your students are still attending universities," replied Merchant Prince Kelvara. "Human economic advisors have determined that our entire financial system is based on artificial scarcity and unnecessary competition. They've offered to implement post-scarcity economic models that would ensure universal prosperity. Half my sector's governments are ready to accept their proposals." "And why shouldn't they?" asked Captain Jorik Thane, who had become an unofficial human liaison. "The humans are offering solutions to problems we've struggled with for millennia: poverty, disease, resource conflicts, territorial disputes. They can eliminate all of it." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," Zelkane muttered. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement from the council chamber's main display. Dr. James Rodriguez, another human scientist, appeared via holographic projection from Earth. "Attention, Galactic Council members," he began with the cheerful efficiency that had become humanity's trademark. "We've completed our analysis of galactic civilization and identified several areas where we can provide immediate assistance." The display shifted to show charts and graphs that hurt to look at directly. Human mathematics had evolved beyond three-dimensional limitations, making their visual presentations somewhat traumatic for species still bound by conventional physics. "First," Dr. Rodriguez continued, "we've noticed that many species experience something called death due to biological system failures. We can fix this by upgrading your cellular repair mechanisms and consciousness backup systems. The process is completely voluntary, of course." Several council members began the breathing patterns associated with panic attacks in their respective species. The casual way humans discussed eliminating mortality made them deeply uncomfortable. "Second, we've observed that many civilizations are limited by the speed of light for communication and travel. We can establish a galaxy-wide instantaneous transit network that would make every world as close as the next room. Third," and here Dr. Rodriguez's expression became especially earnest, "we've noticed that different species have incompatible atmospheric requirements, which seems to limit social interaction. We can provide universal adaptation technology that would allow anyone to live comfortably anywhere." The list continued for 27 more items, each more revolutionary than the last. Humans had apparently spent 3 weeks cataloging every limitation, inefficiency, and problem in galactic civilization, and they had solutions for all of them. Zelkane listened with growing horror as Dr. Rodriguez outlined plans that would fundamentally alter the nature of existence itself. Humans didn't just want to fix individual problems. They wanted to optimize reality. When the presentation ended, the chamber fell silent. Finally, Counselor Mira Lenz spoke for the ethereal collective, her voice unusually strained. "Dr. Rodriguez, these proposals are comprehensive, but surely implementation would take centuries of careful planning and testing." Dr. Rodriguez looked surprised. "Oh, we've already completed the testing phase. Implementation could begin immediately if you approve. We have everything ready to go." "Everything?" Zelkane asked weakly. "Of course. We wouldn't propose solutions without having them fully developed first. That would be inefficient." The word inefficient had become terrifying when spoken by humans. It meant they had identified something that could be improved. And human improvements tended to be thorough, to the point of being unrecognizable. Counselor Vex's Thul's compound eyes shifted through several color spectrums before he managed to speak. "Dr. Rodriguez, perhaps we could start with smaller, more limited implementations? Test these technologies on a smaller scale before galaxy-wide deployment?" "We appreciate the caution," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "But limited testing would actually be less safe than full implementation. Our models show that partial deployment could create compatibility issues between upgraded and non-upgraded systems. This was another fundamental difference between humans and the rest of galactic civilization. When other species said, "careful testing," they meant gradual, cautious progress over extended periods. When humans said, "careful testing," they meant running billions of simulations in a few hours and then proceeding with complete confidence in their calculations. The meeting was interrupted by an emergency alert. The display shifted to show the outer rim of the galaxy, where something impossible was happening. Stars were moving. "Ah," said Dr. Rodriguez cheerfully. "That would be our engineering team implementing the Galactic Optimization Project. We noticed that stellar distribution in several sectors was suboptimal for supporting life. We're relocating some stars to improve habitability throughout the galaxy." The casual announcement that humans were rearranging stars like furniture caused several council members to faint. Those who remained conscious stared at the display, showing massive suns being gently pushed into new positions by forces that shouldn't exist. "You're moving stars," Zelkane said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just the ones that weren't being used efficiently, Doctor," Rodriguez assured him. "We're being very careful not to disrupt any inhabited systems. Although we did take the liberty of upgrading several solar systems that were experiencing stellar instability." The inhabitants seemed quite pleased with the improvements. Another display appeared, showing messages of gratitude from dozens of species whose dying suns had been mysteriously revitalized and whose planets had been moved to optimal orbital positions. The messages were universally positive, expressing awe and gratitude for the miraculous salvation. But Zelkane wasn't looking at the grateful messages. He was staring at the casual ease with which humans had accomplished what galactic civilization had always considered impossible. They weren't just moving individual stars. They were optimizing entire stellar regions like a cosmic urban planning project. "How?" he finally managed to ask. Dr. Rodriguez looked puzzled. "How what?" "The stellar engineering? It's quite straightforward. Once you understand that space-time is more flexible than most people assume. We can show you the mathematics if you're interested." "Please don't," several council members said simultaneously. The problem wasn't that humans were malicious. The problem was that they were helpful. They saw problems everywhere they looked, and they couldn't resist fixing them. The fact that their solutions were incomprehensibly advanced and implemented with impossible speed just made them more eager to share their innovations. "Doctor," Sarah Chen spoke up from her position near the chamber entrance. "Professor Zelkane, I can see that you're concerned about the pace of change. Would it help if we slowed down our implementation schedule? We could stretch the remaining upgrades out over several weeks instead of completing everything this weekend. Several weeks to transform galactic civilization. Humans thought this was taking things slowly." "Dr. Chen," Zelkane said carefully, "what if we asked you to stop the upgrades entirely? Would you be willing to leave the galaxy as it is?" Sarah and Dr. Rodriguez exchanged glances, the kind of look that parents might share when a child asked something adorably naive. "Professor," Sarah said gently, "we can't just leave things broken when we know how to fix them. That wouldn't be ethical, but we're certainly willing to discuss the implementation timeline if you have concerns about specific aspects of the upgrades." And there it was. Humans couldn't conceive of leaving problems unsolved. Their inability to ignore inefficiency and suffering wasn't a character flaw. It was their defining characteristic. They were constitutionally incapable of not helping, even when their help was unwanted. The ancient warnings echoed in Zelkane's memory. They do not seek to conquer, they seek to improve. This makes them far more dangerous than any army. As if summoned by his thoughts, another human entered the chamber. This one was younger, wearing what appeared to be student clothing, and carrying a device that made Zelkane's scientific instruments register impossible readings. "Dr. Chen, Dr. Rodriguez," the young human said excitedly. "We've figured out how to solve the consciousness compatibility problem. We can give every species in the galaxy access to the same cognitive enhancement framework. No more communication barriers, no more misunderstandings based on different thinking patterns." "That's wonderful, Marcus," Dr. Chen said proudly. "See? The next generation is already improving on our work." Zelkane felt his last hopes crumble. The humans weren't just transforming the galaxy. They were teaching their children to continue the transformation. There would be no return to the way things were, because humans would always find new ways to make things better. The chamber's displays lit up with reports from across the galaxy. Human improvements were spreading faster than light itself. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years were becoming unrecognizable in a matter of days. And through it all, humans remained cheerfully helpful, genuinely concerned about everyone's well-being, and absolutely convinced that they were doing the right thing. The ancients had been wrong about one thing, Zelkane realized. They had warned that humans would be the ending of all things peaceful. But humans weren't ending peace. They were enforcing it through technological superiority so overwhelming that conflict became meaningless. They weren't conquerors. They were gardeners, and they were pruning the galaxy into their vision of paradise, whether the galaxy wanted it or not. The most terrifying part was that their version of paradise actually worked. 6 months had passed since first contact, and the galaxy no longer resembled anything Professor Zelkane recognized. The transformation was complete, efficient, and utterly terrifying in its perfection. Standing in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers, now a collaborative optimization center, as the humans cheerfully called it, Zelkane surveyed the impossible vista before him. The chamber itself existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously, allowing representatives from thousands of species to attend meetings regardless of their physical limitations or environmental requirements. Death had become optional galaxy-wide 3 months ago. Disease was extinct. Poverty was a historical curiosity. War was literally impossible, not because of treaties or diplomacy, but because humans had made violence physically ineffective through what they called reality adjustment protocols. And yet, as Zelkane watched the perfect harmony of this new galactic civilization, he felt more afraid than ever. Dr. Sarah Chen materialized beside him, using her preferred method of transportation, direct matter conversion across space-time. She had evolved beyond needing things like doors or vehicles, though she still maintained her human appearance out of courtesy to species that found shape-shifting disturbing. "Professor Zelkane," she said, her smile as warm and genuine as ever, "I wanted to thank you personally for your assistance with the Cultural Preservation Project. Your insights into pre-optimization social structures have been invaluable." The Cultural Preservation Project was humanity's solution to the concern that their improvements might erase the unique characteristics of different species. They had created perfect simulations of traditional galactic civilization, complete with artificial scarcity, simulated conflict, and programmed inefficiencies, where species could experience their historical culture whenever they felt nostalgic. Most beings found these simulations more satisfying than their actual past had been, since the humans had optimized even the simulations to eliminate the genuinely unpleasant aspects of traditional life while preserving the meaningful elements. It was heritage without suffering, tradition without tragedy. "Dr. Chen," Zelkane said carefully, "I've been reviewing the implementation reports. The changes to galactic civilization have been comprehensive. Indeed." Sarah's enthusiasm was genuine and infectious. "We're actually ahead of schedule on most optimization metrics. Galaxy-wide life satisfaction is up 847%. Productivity has increased by factors that don't translate well into your numerical systems. And we've completely eliminated involuntary suffering while maintaining meaningful challenges for personal growth." That was the thing about humans that continued to amaze and terrify everyone else. They hadn't just solved problems. They had solved the concept of unsolvable problems. Every limitation, every source of misery, every inefficiency had been systematically identified and corrected. The Cortex, who had once defined themselves through warfare, now experienced the thrill of battle in elaborate simulations that provided all the psychological satisfaction of combat with none of the actual consequences. They were happier than they had ever been, which somehow made their transformation more unsettling rather than less. The trade-based civilizations that had thrived on scarcity and competition now managed massive creative projects, channeling their competitive instincts into artistic and intellectual pursuits that pushed the boundaries of beauty and knowledge. They produced wonders that made their previous commercial achievements seem trivial. Species that had spent millennia locked in genetic limitations now could modify themselves at will, becoming anything they could imagine while retaining their essential identity. The freedom was intoxicating and absolute. Professor, Sarah continued, we've received the final reports from the Deep Analysis Project. Would you like to see the results? Zelkane's heart sank. The Deep Analysis Project was humanity's examination of the ancient warnings that had started this entire situation. He had been hoping the humans might find some wisdom in those ancient words that would give them pause. What did you discover? He asked reluctantly. Sarah pulled up a holographic display that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making it easier for various species to understand the information according to their cognitive frameworks. It turns out the ancients were absolutely correct in their warnings, she said cheerfully. Humans really are exactly as dangerous as they described. We are a species that cannot accept limitations. We do transform everything we encounter, and we absolutely refuse to leave problems unsolved. Zelkane stared at her. And that doesn't concern you? Oh, it did initially, Sarah admitted. But then we realized that the ancients made a critical error in their analysis. They assumed that the transformation humans bring would necessarily be harmful. They couldn't imagine that a species might be compulsively helpful rather than compulsively destructive. The display shifted to show comparative analyses of galactic civilization before and after human intervention. Every metric, lifespan, happiness, technological capability, artistic achievement, personal freedom, social harmony, had improved by orders of magnitude. The ancients feared us because they couldn't comprehend our motivations, Sarah continued. They saw our power to change things and assumed we would change them for the worse. But humans don't seek to dominate or destroy. We seek to optimize and improve. The ancients' warnings were accurate about our capabilities but completely wrong about our intentions. But what if optimization isn't what we wanted? Zelkane asked quietly. Sarah looked genuinely puzzled. I don't understand the question, Professor. Why wouldn't you want things to be better? And there, in that simple question, lay the heart of the human enigma. They were literally incapable of understanding why anyone might prefer inefficiency, struggle, or imperfection. To them, the choice between better and worse was so obvious that alternatives weren't really choices at all. The chamber's communication system activated, displaying messages from across the galaxy. Representatives of species that had initially resisted human intervention were now requesting additional optimizations. The ethereal collective wanted help expanding their consciousness beyond dimensional boundaries. The insectoid hive minds were asking for assistance in developing individual personalities while maintaining collective unity. Even the most traditional species had discovered that human improvements weren't taking away their essential nature. They were making them more themselves than they had ever been before. Professor Zelkane, came a voice from behind him. He turned to see Counselor Vex Thule approaching, but the counselor looked different. His compound eyes now sparkled with an inner light that suggested enhanced perception, and his movements had a grace that spoke of optimized physical systems. Counselor, Zelkane said warily, I see you've accepted the enhancement package. I have, Vex Thule replied, and his voice carried harmonics that hadn't existed before. I resisted for months, preferring to remain as nature made me. But I finally realized that refusing to improve was just another form of stubbornness. The humans weren't trying to change who I am. They were helping me become who I was always meant to be. This was happening across the galaxy. Initial resistance was giving way to enthusiastic acceptance, as beings discovered that human optimization didn't erase their identity. It amplified it. Warriors became better warriors. Artists became better artists. Thinkers became better thinkers. Everyone became more themselves. Dr. Marcus Chen, Sarah's nephew and part of the new generation of humans, who had grown up thinking galactic optimization was normal, appeared in the chamber carrying what looked like a small star contained in a transparent sphere. Aunt Sarah, he said excitedly, we've finished the prototype for the next phase of the project. We can begin implementation whenever you're ready. The next phase? Zelkane asked with growing dread. Marcus beamed with the enthusiasm that seemed to be humanity's default state. We're expanding beyond this galaxy. Our deep space observations have identified hundreds of other galactic civilizations that could benefit from optimization. We can help them too. Olo, the small star in his hands, pulsed with energy that registered as impossible on every scientific instrument in the chamber.